I'd like to invite our next speaker for the third session, Professor Juan Burgos. He'll be presenting today on Wojtyła's thought in the 21st century, integral personalism. He joins us from Spain, from the Universidad Villanueva from Madrid. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you to Professor Wojtyła for the invitation to stay here and talk about Karol Wojtyła. My idea mainly is to present my project on the future of thinking of Karol Wojtyła, and my talk will have two parts. The first part will be a justification of this project. And the second part will be like trying to explain what are the parts that are developed of this project until this moment. No? So, I'll skip this part because already has been said a lot about the project about the intellectual project of Karol Wojtyła, and so I will go directly to this point that for me is like a bit the key of the proposal. No? My point here is that what can we do with the philosophy of Karol Wojtyła? Not only to talk about Karol Wojtyła, but also to develop his philosophy. And I think that we have here a problem that is the originality of the thinking of Karol Wojtyła. I think that in the discussion that we have until now, this originality has been shown up, no? Because someone preferred to talk about Wojtyła as a more Thomist, another one preferred to talk about Wojtyła about more phenomenologies. And I think that here the problem, or at least in my view, the problem here is that to focus in that Karol Wojtyła is an original thinker. So at the end, we cannot place Wojtyła in one place or in other, but we have to realize this original thinking and to go on after this, taking into account this idea. So that is why I talk about the idea of the personal action as a no man's land, because in a way I think it's placed in some places in the middle. No? I will try to justify, as I said before, this part, and then I will talk on the development. In my way, there is a lot of discussion about these points. Wojtyła admires Thomas Aquinas, but to me, clearly, he's not a Thomist, in the sense that he develops a new kind of thinking, and he doesn't use the Thomist concept as such. No? In the same way, we can say that with regarding Seller and the phenomenology, I think we have the same idea. Wojtyła has a lot of admiration for Seller, but at the same time, he's not Sellerian, and at the same time, he's not a phenomenologist. I think that he never talks of himself as a phenomenologist. Never says, we phenomenologists say that, but he says in a different way, the phenomenologists say this thing, but he doesn't identify himself as a phenomenologist. No? We can develop also why I think that he's not a phenomenologist, even if he is very influenced by this phenomenology. If we go now to personalism, it happens the same. Wojtyła, clearly, at least in my view, he's a personalist, but he doesn't identify himself with any specific personalist current. We have, I will talk after that about the different kind of personalism, but he even don't explain why he understands by personalism. But we have the communitarian, dialogical, phenomenological, and so on. So this happens that Wojtyła is placed in a very specific and original way. If we try to understand what are the ideas of personal actions, that is his main philosophical book, we find to a very original position that is very difficult to place in any specific current. For example, it begins with the analysis of experience. A lot of have been said here about experience, but I think that we have the empirics of Hume, but if we leave Hume and the Beaten experience, there are not a lot of philosophers who starts by experience. Because, for example, phenomenology starts with the intuition of the essences, and Thomists don't start with experience because it's a category that is not very common to the personalist thinking. His anthropology, as we all know, is not built from the person, from the idea of person, but his anthropology is built from his idea of action. He starts with actions, and from actions goes back to person. So this is also very original. I don't know any other book that has done this same thing. So we have here another philosophical approach, very interesting. No? Also, he is very interested and he's very focused on the importance of consciousness. A lot of consciousness has been said here too, but he tries to put together the consciousness and objectivity. These two different worlds creates the problem that we don't know, or it's difficult for us to place Wojtyła on the objectivistic way or on the objective place, like will be Thomist and the classical philosophy, or the subjectivistic side where we have to place all the modern philosophy. More points, like for example, his understanding of freedom is very interesting because he doesn't use the theory of powers, because for him freedom is not a characteristic of the will, even though it's a characteristic of the will too, but is a characteristic of the person. So here we have also a different approach, because here his main category is not nature, in my way, and also the powers, but his main personal category is person. Probably that would be a polemic statement, but in my way, he doesn't use the classical categories in his in personal action. So that the act and potency is not used. The four causes are not used. The substance and accidents are not used in his way of understanding person. So we don't have a specific Thomistic way. And in these cases, he creates his own categories. That is what gives personal action a very original position. And in my way too, he doesn't elaborate a typical metaphysical approach or system. No? And I think he says this at the end of personal action, but I think it can be described more precisely as an ontological analysis, but not as a metaphysical analysis, for the reason that I have said before, that he doesn't use these classical categories, like for example, form and matter. So on other like this, no? Well, this is the problem. So where to place personal action is, from my point of view, is very difficult to place personal action in any philosophical category. And if we try to do this, we have probably a problem that we have to force or to distort a bit the ideas that he has described in it, because they are different from all the other approaches. So I have studied Wojtyła for several years, and I got little by little to this idea. So as the time passed by, I say, well, the only way to really make the point to the philosophy of Karol Wojtyła is to create or to propose a new kind of philosophy, a new philosophical current that drowns all the idea of Karol Wojtyła. That was the idea that started all this project, and this project is the integral personalism. I think we have a noise there. Okay. And this was the idea of the project of integral personalism. What is integral personalism? The idea of integral personalism is to offer a new philosophical, yes, okay. Philosophy is like this. The idea of this project is to offer a new philosophical current that is based on the thinking of John Paul II, maybe more exactly on the thinking of Karol Wojtyła. I will explain a bit more why I understand that no one of the philosophical or the personalist current that now exists can fit really the thinking of John Paul II. So we have also the American personalist, that is the first personalist current, but this is an idealistic personalist, so it is clear that doesn't fit the philosophy of Karol Wojtyła. We have also the phenomenological personalist, if we can call that the thinking of Seller, Edith Stein, and so on. But Wojtyła is not a phenomenology. For example, his view of conscience is very different from the view of conscience in Husserl, and we can go on this idea. No? Communitarian personalism is another current. Communitarian personalism is based on the thinking of Emmanuel Mounier, but Wojtyła, if I am not wrong, never quote Emmanuel Mounier, so it's very difficult to say that he's a communitarian personalism. We have also the dialogical personalism, which is based mainly on Buber, but here we have an interesting problem that was shown up in the first session, that Wojtyła, as any other personalist, give importance to the interpersonal relationship, but he does not he understands that person has a priority over relation. This is a topic that is a topic of discussion in personalism, but in this sense, it's difficult to consider that Wojtyła can be placed inside this dialogical personalism, and on top of that, the view of Wojtyła is ontological, and the dialogical personalism is not ontological. So the last one will be the Thomistic personalism, that is the personalism developed by Jacques Maritain, but in my view, this personalism is very classic, because Jacques Maritain, as it is known, he always talk of himself as a Thomist. He was a neo-Thomist, but the main categories of Jacques Maritain are different, or the main anthropological reasons of Jacques Maritain are different from those of Wojtyła. So those are all the reasons that at the end I thought that to really take advantage of all the potency of the power of the Wojtyła thinking was necessary to open a new way in which this thinking can be developed, not caring a lot about is this or is this other thing or is in this side or is in this other side. But Wojtyła is Wojtyła. He developed his own thinking. Well, so what will be the integral personalism, this project? It is based on Wojtyła philosophy. This is the main topic. So we had to use all the writings, all the philosophy that Wojtyła did. But we have to develop that philosophy because Wojtyła talk about several things in a very, very deep way, but he talks about very specific topics because he has to do many other things. So at the end, Wojtyła talks about person, ethics, moral, and sexual ethics, but not too much, not too many things more. No? So the idea will be to complete the philosophy and apply it to new scenarios. Okay? So what is? So I will explain now more or less what I am trying to do is to departing from the philosophy of Wojtyła, try to develop this new to develop this philosophy, like in some places writing things that he didn't write, okay, and in some places developing some insights. Okay, what we do have now, mainly we have an anthropology. The anthropology, the main book of the anthropology of the proposal, logically is Personal Action. Or Personal Action because it's the main book of Karol Wojtyła and it's like the framework of all this idea of integral personalism. I have also written a book of anthropology. It's more like a more pedagogical because as all we know, Personal Action is a very tough work. And that will be, in this case, we'll have the anthropology, but in the case of the anthropology, the main reference without a doubt is the Personal Action of Karol Wojtyła. Well, this is the diagram of the person that I have developed. It's based on the idea of Karol Wojtyła, but is not strictly connected with Karol Wojtyła because it has also ideas from Hildebrand, from Julian Marías, from other thinkings. This is the same diagram seen in another way. Well, the idea, I don't have time now to explain this diagram, but will be the basis of the anthropology of this integral personalism. Second point is an epistemology. The point about epistemology is interesting because one of the originalities of Personal Action is that it's a book of anthropology that starts with an epistemology. So, and the reason is why a book of anthropology has to start with an epistemology. The reason is because I think that Wojtyła knew that no one, nor the classic epistemology, nor the idealistic epistemology were good to develop the anthropology he wanted to develop. So that is why he, at the beginning of Personal Action, he develops a very small epistemology, but with very important keys, like experience of an understanding. Experience is the beginning of his epistemology, but he doesn't speak only of experience. He speaks of many other things. He speaks of understanding as the way of stabilizing the experience. He speaks also of induction as a way of, as different of abstraction and several other things. No? So, but in this case, he has written only like 15 pages of epistemology, which evidently is not enough for a theory, for epistemology complete. No? So in this case, what I did was to develop this idea, this epistemology of Karol Wojtyła in this book, which is, I have several books on this point, but the last one is called the Originary Source, which what it offers is a systematic epistemology based on the ideas of Karol Wojtyła. I clearly it's a very not a very low, but 300 pages book. So I think that it's connected and it is loyal to the thinking of Wojtyła, but that will be like a kind of development from this general idea. Another interesting, important point is metaphysics. Here, a lot of has been said about metaphysics too, but from my point of view, as I said before, Wojtyła doesn't. I can say that we can divide the classical metaphysics into levels: the categorical level and the transcendental level. I understand by the categorical level mainly the categories of Aristotle. I think that Wojtyła doesn't use these categories in Personal Acts and in other ethical books because there are no good categories for anthropology. So what he does is not a metaphysical approach, that's what he explained, but he creates a new categories that are a synthesis from the classical world and the modern world. I have developed these ideas in these books. What I think that he still uses is the transcendental metaphysics, which is built by the main ideas of the essence and the act of being. Wojtyła uses that, but he doesn't use these other ideas of the Aristotelian categories. So this book, the idea of this book is to try to explain and precise this kind of thinking. And the last book the last point is ethics. What do we do with ethics? In this case, what we have in Karol Wojtyła are a very interesting writing. We have Love and Responsibility, that we can think is like a book of sexual ethics. But if we go to fundamental ethics, to basic ethics, we don't have, unfortunately, we don't have like a person and action on ethics by Karol Wojtyła. What we have is the Loving Lessons, and we have several ethics articles, and we have Man and the Responsibility, that are very interesting books, very deep books, but they are not structured. So we cannot say in a direct way, this is the ethics of Karol Wojtyła. So in this case, what I try to do is like to build a systematic ethics based or inspired, because it's not the ethics of Karol Wojtyła, it's an ethics which is inspired on the thinking of Karol Wojtyła, taking in account his main ideas, for example, the importance of the moral experience that is basic in the thought of Karol Wojtyła, also the idea, for example, of the moral norm, which is the way he built his ethics, taking as a main concept moral norm, also the personalism norm, which is very important for Wojtyła. We know that in Love and Responsibility, he speaks of the personalist norm. Even after that, I think there is a rethinking of this idea. No? But what we have now is, what I have written, this is a book that has appeared very recently, The Ethics of the Person. The ethics of the person is, as it happens with the epistemology, is an ethics that is inspired in the thinking of John Paul II. As I said before, I cannot say that this is the ethics of John Paul II because it's an ethics that I have built, but some or many of the main ideas are inspired on this thinking. No? So with all these things, we have also ethics, anthropology, epistemology, a position about metaphysics, and I have forgotten to talk about something is missing here, that is a theory of personalism. That is another point. I have a book translated into English. What was necessary a theory of personalism? Because Wojtyła talks of himself as a personalist, but he never said what he thinks, what he understands by personalism. So, I was interested in creating a new personalist theory, it was important and necessary to say what personality was. So that's why well, the book is there, but it's difficult to say. It is called An Introduction to Personalism. So this book explains what is personalism, at least for me, and in this sense, is where we can place the theory of the Wojtyła thinking as a specific way of understanding personalism. Okay. So, and now to finish, I only want to say that this way of integral personalism is getting popular. So there are, specifically in the Spanish-speaking world, because this is my place of reference. I speak Spanish, so I have followers mainly in the Spanish-speaking world. So this kind of thinking, the proposal of integral personalism, is getting popular because for many people it's useful in the sense that it offers a structured view of personalism. So this structured view of personalism permit to build on this view and permit to develop this view in several parts, in several views. So here we have writings, books, or even PhD who has already been done, taking as a basis this integral personalism. So it seems to me that this is getting very interesting. First, to develop integral personalism, but it's a way that the thinking of Karol Wojtyła is getting used by several people. No? So we have personalized bioethics, several writings that have been done based on this integral personalism. There are writings on psychology, based on this integral personalism. On education, for example, the first one is a PhD that has been defended very recently in 2023 in Mexico. Well, there is also a very interesting proposal that is being developed in Spain, that is a philosophy, a personalist philosophy of cinema, of movies. This is really growing in Spain. The professor José Alfredo Pérez is who is developing this idea, and he has now a group of researchers that is working on this field. And the basis is personalism in general and integral personalism in specific, and maybe even leadership and coaching. No? All these writings are basis of this integral personalism. So I think it's an interesting proposal. It's a way to develop and to spread the thinking of Karol Wojtyła in the 21st century, not only using Wojtyła like as a part of history of philosophy, trying to understand what he exactly says, which is very important, evidently, because it's not so far from us, but also using Karol Wojtyła, but for a new production of philosophy or philosophical thinkings in many areas. Well, thank you very much.